Previously on this channel, you joined me for my million-mile flight on Delta Airlines. It was a privilege to make it to this milestone, and I showed you what it's like the day of the flight and everything that comes along with it. But what I didn't do is what I normally do. I didn't focus on air traffic procedures and air traffic control, so that's what I'm going to do in this video. And let me tell you, this flight, despite it being my million-miler flight, was really different from an air traffic perspective. My million-miler flight felt like it was a million miles long. So come join me again for a behind-the-scenes look into what happened on the ground and in the sky. For this flight, I'm getting right to the action. If you want to see the details of what happened in the airport and inside this Delta A321, go back and watch the previous video. Today's video is long, so I'm beginning right here at pushback from gate 82 at Terminal C at LaGuardia Airport. Everything in this video will be from the viewpoint from my window at seat 1D on the right side of the plane. While I typically sit on the left-hand side of the plane when I know runway 4 is going to be the departure runway, which it is today, only seats on the right side were available. The left side typically provides the best Manhattan views, but as you can see, the weather is less than ideal today. Don't worry, the water drops on the window will go away, and the weather will improve a bit by the time we take off. For now, the tug is pushing us back onto the ramp between the 80s and 90s gates. Being a wide area, there are 2 lanes between the 2 concourses, lane 17 and 18. We're pushing back onto lane 18, which is closer to our gate. Things are operationally efficient with 2 lanes, but at this point, no one has any idea of what's about to happen. It seems like we'll get out quickly at this point, but the truth is that we're not the only airplane headed in the direction that we're headed. You see, nearly all flights headed to the south, like us, have to pass over one single point in the sky. It's called White, and it's located at the corner of Lawrence Avenue and Beachmont Street in Pine Lake Park in Ocean County, New Jersey. Right now, multiple departures from multiple New York City airports are doing what we're doing. They're all taxiing out at the same time and will use what's called the White intersection. Somewhere ahead of us, on the ground here at LaGuardia, is JetBlue 1371. It's taxiing to runway 4. This flight is headed to Fort Lauderdale, so it's also going to use White. We're about to hear the tower tell him that there are 2 more flights headed to White ahead of him, so he'll have to wait 16 minutes.
JetBlue 1371, be 2 more White, right? So 16 more minutes. JetBlue 1371, Russian.
Now, we don't know about the delay yet, but now that our tug has been removed and our engines have been started, it's time to call ground control for taxi instructions. The pilot will indicate that he has whiskey, which is the current letter identification, W, for the current airport information. Our call sign today is Delta 2520.
Ground 2520, 17 Alpha with whiskey.
I'm missing. Who's that 17?
Delta 2520 with whiskey.
What kind of whiskey you got?
I like bourbon.
Unfortunately, you're overweight, so it's going to be a long delay. Left on Alpha and hold tequila.
Alpha short of kilo, Delta 2520.
Unfortunately, it's going to be a long delay since we're headed to White, and the controller made a joke about whiskey to lighten the mood because of the delay. But the good news is that we can start our taxi out of the ramp, and we're told to taxi via Alpha and hold short of Kilo. That at least gets us toward runway 4. Now, remember that the controller previously told JetBlue he was number 2 for White, so he would have to wait 16 minutes, which means that ATC is placing 8 minutes behind each departure headed to White. The tower doesn't make that call. That comes from the regional airspace control zones that are actively working traffic in the air headed to all of the departure fixes. Unfortunately, White is saturated. Not only do flights from LaGuardia use White to get to the south, but so do flights from Newark, Teterboro, and Westchester. Right now, so many planes just want to head south. Now, at this point, if JetBlue needs to wait 16 minutes, and if we're behind JetBlue, and there are 8 minutes needed between each White departure, we will need to wait 16 plus 8 minutes, which is 24 minutes. So it makes sense that the controller has us taxi just part of the way, and we can just wait a taxiway Kilo. This allows the controller to place other aircraft ahead of us, so we have the separation needed to be given clearance for takeoff with White as our departure fix. So this technically means that by the time each airplane flies over White, the next airplane can't fly over White until 8 minutes after the previous one did, right? Well, not really, because the 8-minute separation rule is for flights leaving LaGuardia, and there are other airplanes that are taking off from other airports that are also headed to White. So for now, we just stay on taxiway Alpha and simply parallel runway 31. Runway 4 is around the corner, and eventually we will have to make a left turn around the airport's bend to get to runway 31. Once we get to taxiway Kilo, we'll come to a stop, and at that point we'll simply wait for the controller to provide the next instruction. We got there quickly, so let's move forward a few taxiways to that point. Upon arrival at Kilo, we stopped, but the controller quickly came back and provided subsequent taxi instructions for us.
Delta 2520. Once you're able, continue Alpha, just go Foxtrot Bravo, short of Echo.
Alpha, Foxtrot, Bravo, short of Echo, Delta 2520.
So when able, we can continue on Alpha, and at Foxtrot we'll continue to Bravo until we reach Echo, where we will wait. Echo is a taxiway that's located around the bend, just off of runway 4 at its midpoint. This is a good place for us to wait, since it's only 3,500 feet to taxi straight to the runway, and it does what the controller needs. Waiting on taxiway Bravo, holding short of taxiway Echo, allows the controller to place other aircraft in front of us, and we most definitely need to be behind an aircraft that is not going to use white as the initial departure fix. Now, just so you know, the tower will place ahead of us a flight whose initial departure fix is Cote, which is to the west. This will be a United Airlines flight that's going west to Chicago O'Hare. It makes sense that us, a Delta flight going to Florida, would be placed behind a United flight. From LaGuardia, United does not service Florida at all, so white would likely never be a United Airlines departure fix. And from LaGuardia, JetBlue flies mostly to Florida, so it would be uncommon for a Florida-bound Delta flight to be placed behind a JetBlue flight, especially during situations like today's where white is just overloaded. Now, a Delta flight bound for a destination such as, say, Boston would have no issues being behind a JetBlue flight bound for Florida, but we cannot be behind JetBlue. Now, our pilot hasn't communicated anything to the passengers yet, but it's now time for him to check in with the ground controller to find out what our sequence is. Although a bit unclear, it appears that he is asking for the wait time for white.
Ground Delta 2520, what's that? Waiting for white there.
Delta 2520, you're slotted for number 4. 8 minutes PH1.
All right, thanks. Let's do some math.
So we're number 4, and there are 8 minutes needed between each flight to white. 8 times 4 is 32 minutes. So the pilot is going to make an announcement to the passengers about the anticipated wait time, although he shortens it a bit. I guess he's hopeful.
Hey folks, on Flight Deck, just a quick update. Our route of flight is a little bit congested. A lot of aircraft heading down to the south right now with a lot of weather, so it's going to cause us a little bit of a delay getting out of here, probably about 20 to 25 minutes. We are going to be still moving on active taxiways, so stay seated with that seatbelt sign fastened.
Now we're going to be told to follow the United plane, which is going to Cote.
Delta 2520 at Echo, you're going to hold and follow a United 7-tree.
All right, follow the United at Echo, Delta 2520.
We can't see the United plane because it's on the other side of us, but as soon as it slips in front of us via taxiway Echo, we can follow it straight to runway 4. Since we have been sequenced and we only need to move straight ahead to get to the runway, the tower tells us to monitor the tower frequency, which is responsible for runway traffic.
Delta 2520, Montana.
Tower Delta 2520.
So we can inch forward in the line of planes ahead of us until we're at the end and are told to enter the runway. We'll move forward to the point where we're near takeoff, and for some reason, we didn't wait the 32 minutes as anticipated. JetBlue 1371 is directly in front of United, and spoiler alert, we're next after that, and we didn't wait 8 minutes after JetBlue. Perhaps air traffic control lifted the 8-minute separation rule, but there were a ton of planes that were headed to white. I'm not exactly sure what's going on at this point, but I think that we're not going to get cleared directly to white once we're in the air. Here's the tower giving JetBlue takeoff clearance and telling United to line up and wait. We'll be next.
Blue 1371, traffic just more than 8 miles final, runway 4, clear for takeoff, 120.14.
JetBlue 1371, clear for takeoff, runway 4.
United 1504, look at the tower, runway 4, line for way, traffic 8 miles final, runway 31.
Left wait, runway 4, United 1520.
Now, there was traffic for runway 31 that was 8 miles out, so the tower is able to issue United takeoff clearance directly after JetBlue without having to wait for a plane to land on runway 31. Runway 31 arrivals are using the curved RNAV X-ray approach with a tight left base for landing. Typically, once a plane lands on runway 31 and clears the runway, a plane is given takeoff clearance on runway 4. Well, the arrival is now 4.5 miles out, so the tower tells United to take off, and we're told to line up and wait on runway 4.
United 1504, traffic 4.5 mile final, runway 31, 130 at 14, runway 4, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 4, United 1504.
Delta 2520, LaGuardia Tower, runway 4, line up on the way, traffic 4 mile final, runway 2.
Line up on the way, runway 4, Delta 2520.
Things are moving really fast. JetBlue just took off and we're already entering runway 4. I was really not expecting to be here this quickly. As we line up on runway 4, the plane that was on the 4.5 mile final for runway 31 will land. As a matter of fact, 2 planes will land on runway 31 before we're going to be given takeoff clearance on runway 4. As we turn onto runway 4, I'm lucky I'm seated on this side of the plane because I get to see all the way down the runway and watch United take off. But I'm not just looking for who's ahead of us. I'm looking to see who's on approach to runway 31 and how the tower will push our flight out on runway 4 between arrivals so that there's no conflict at the intersection of the departure and arrival runways. Here's the plane. As soon as that plane lands and clears runway 31, we're going to be given takeoff clearance on runway 4. As we await takeoff clearance on runway 4, I'm looking out for the next arrival. We should see it in a moment from the right side of the screen, making a left base leg for runway 31. We'll see this plane once again as soon as we lift off, right before it lands on runway 31. In the next transmission, the previous arrival, American 1713, has just landed, so the tower will have it clear the runway after praising his landing. With traffic on a 2-mile final for runway 31, which we can now clearly see out the window, we'll get takeoff clearance.
American 1760, that was an excellent landing, turn left taxiway, Romeo, left turn Papa ground point 7 great.
Romeo Papa, thanks, American 1760.
And here is good too. 2520, traffic 2 mile final, runway 21, runway 4, clear for takeoff, 135.012.
4, clear for takeoff, Delta 2520.
Delta 2991, LaGuardia Tower, runway 4, line up on the way, traffic landing, runway 21.
9.4, Delta 29.
Delta 524, reduce final 4 speed.
Push now, Delta 524.
Delta 524, I would appreciate a peak report.
It's around 1,800.
Delta 524, thanks so much. Go.
And American 3234 on the RNAV X-ray 31.
American 3234, LaGuardia Tower, number 3, following Airbus 621, you're 1 o'clock and 5.5 miles. Traffic to the final hold position, runway 4, 1350 at 12, runway 31. Clear to land and last support base for 1800.
31 clear to land, American 3234.
There goes that traffic that we saw a few seconds ago. It's about to land. We're airborne only 4 minutes behind the JetBlue flight headed to White and are told to contact New York Departure Control.
Delta 2520, contacting departure today.
Got departure, Delta 2522.
As we get handed off to the departure controller, we're in a left turn to 360 degrees on the Bronx climb, which will put us right up the middle of the Bronx. The controller is located at the New York TRACON in Nassau County on Long Island. We'll check in at 1,700 feet, climbing to the published altitude of 5,000.
Departure Delta 2520, 1700, climb 5,000.
2520 New York, good evening. Radar contact, climb to 12,000 and do not exceed 250 knots.
12,250 knots, Delta 2520.
We're immediately assigned to 12,000 feet, which is 1,000 feet below arrivals to JFK coming in from the west over us. Clearance up to 12,000 feet is an indication that there are no traffic conflicts for us over the Bronx, such as flights from Newark or Westchester that are passing through the airspace. The other instruction that we were given is very rare in an initial transmission. The controller told us right away not to exceed 250 knots. Typically, a command like this is given a little later on, but the controller sees that the demand to White is so high that he gave us a speed restriction right away. We'll be climbing at 250 knots or less for an extended period of time to increase the distance between us and the previous departure bound for White, JetBlue 1371, who's also on this frequency. Speaking of JetBlue 1371, the controller has a message for him.
JetBlue 1371, continue left turn heading 130, delay vectors over White.
Alright, 130 on the heading, JetBlue 1371.
Did you hear that? The controller gave JetBlue a turn to 130 degrees, which is an odd heading to fly to get to White, but the controller told JetBlue that these are delay vectors to White. Unfortunately, JetBlue is too close to the previous flight headed to White, so the current controller is keeping him in his airspace by turning him. This means that we're going to get too close to JetBlue. For now, though, the airspace over the Bronx itself is quiet. We have no traffic conflicts, and there are no airplanes at the moment from other airports passing near us. Today was mostly an IFR day, so there really weren't many general aviation flights either. It's once we get to the other frequencies that the traffic picks up. Nice shadow down there. By this point, we would have already been given a left turn, but we're headed into Westchester County now to keep us away from JetBlue 1371, but we will make some progress. In the next transmission, the controller will give JetBlue 1371 a big turn from 130 degrees to 250 degrees to keep him in his airspace, and we're going to make our first left-hand turn toward the left toward New Jersey.
JetBlue 1371, turn right heading 250.
250 on the heading, JetBlue 1371.
Up to 2520, turn left 270.
Turn 270, 2520.
Now, a turn to 270 degrees isn't anything unusual. It's just happening a little later than normal, but things are going to be far from normal real soon because JetBlue 1371 is lingering in the airspace ahead of us. JetBlue is going to be doing many more turns over New York City, but for now, he's actually leaving the airspace of the current controller, but because this airspace is so complex, he's going to be handed off to another departure controller at the TRACON that handles airspace south of LaGuardia. We'll get handed off to that frequency later on.
JetBlue 1371, contact 12475. Good night.
2475, JetBlue 1371, good night.
So, for now, we continue our turn to 270 degrees. If demand to white was low, we typically just get one more turn to around 220 degrees, and after that, the next controller would tell us to proceed directly to white, but that's not happening today. Despite the speed restriction, the fact that JetBlue did some zigzagging ahead of us, well, we're actually going to be doing the same. We are now over New Jersey, north of the George Washington Bridge. We're headed towards Patterson, and we'll continue on this western heading for some time. What we are doing is similar to what that United flight headed to Chicago was doing ahead of us. That is, heading deep into New Jersey on a westerly heading to get towards Chicago. Now, JetBlue is south of us, but close. I've been in this airspace before, but only when my destination has been a city to the west. Never before have I been on the 270-degree heading at this point while headed to Florida. It's all because we're close to JetBlue. In my mind, I'm thinking, when are we going to turn left? And I'm thinking that the Manhattan view chances are low, as there are clouds, and we're just too far west to begin with before we head south. We're just not set up for what I'm used to, and quite frankly, what I want. In a moment, the controller is going to have us do something completely out of the ordinary. We're about to approach Patterson, New Jersey, but the controller is going to turn us to a heading of 130 degrees. That turns us around and points our nose toward Harlem in Manhattan. Here comes the turn.
Up to 2520, turn left heading 130.
Left turn 130, Delta 2520.
This is a huge turn. It's almost unprecedented. Sure, it happens, but it's very rare. I've been on flights out of Westchester headed to White in this airspace, but I've never experienced a turn this extreme. This is obviously designed to keep us away from JetBlue. Once we level off on the turn, we're going to be pointed towards the Hudson River just south of the George Washington Bridge. We're basically making a U-turn around the Hudson River. This heading will be maintained for miles before the controller comes back and issues us another turn. In the background, in addition to air traffic control, you can hear a flight attendant making the post-takeoff announcement, which usually comes at around 10,000 feet and further along the route of flight. It's happening now in a strange place as we make a turn that will take a full minute and a half to complete. I'm always looking for ways to maintain situational awareness, and since this is an afternoon departure, the sun is in the west. Since we can't see much down there, I'm using the sun as a reference to see which direction is west so I can continue to determine the way we're going. Now, of course, this is in addition to using my phone on the aircraft's Wi-Fi, as well as the screen in front of me, which shows our track, but it's nice to use the window view as well. Typically, I'd be looking out for other aircraft in the sky, but it's harder to do so while you're not going straight, and our departure out of New York is by far the most twisted departure that I've ever experienced. I've never even seen this from the ground in New York City. Sure, I've seen planes get some S-turns and delay vectors, but never before have I seen what I'm experiencing from my seat on this A321. We're spending an extended amount of time over New Jersey now, and it's something I'm not used to. We just passed by Teterboro Airport down there, but we can't see it due to the clouds. I'm thrilled by all of these turns, which are called delay vectors, but I just wish it wasn't so cloudy down there today. This would have been a great extended tour of the New York City area. We're now approaching the Hudson River, just south of the George Washington Bridge, and it's time for another turn.
Up to 2520, turn right 250.
Turn 250, 2520.
That is another huge turn from 130 to 250 degrees. We start the turn over Harlem, and since Manhattan is narrow here, we will continue the turn over the western Bronx before we turn back into Manhattan again. Can you believe we're going to fly over the Bronx a second time? We were just over the Bronx 5 minutes ago. This turn to 250 degrees does indeed bring us further to the south, So we are about to exit the airspace of the LaGuardia controller, and we'll switch to a second controller in the same TRACON facility that handles planes between 12 and 17,000 feet.
2520, continue the right turn 260 and contact 12475. Connect.
All right, 12475 and a right turn to 260, another 2520.
Wow, an additional 10 degrees was just added to this turn. This is huge. Let's check in.
Arc Delta 2520, 12,000.
Delta 2520, New York departure, flight heading 260, vector and trail, maintain 250 knots.
All right, heading 260, 250 knots, Delta 2520.
We're already at 12,000 feet, and the controller mentions how the vector is for in-trail spacing and mechanic speed 250 knots. I see a hole in the clouds down there. In the hole is the Hudson River, and on the far side is the Jersey bank of the river, and on the closer side is the Manhattan bank. We're poised to cross the Hudson River from New York to New Jersey for the second time now. This has never happened to me. Let's see what we can identify Manhattan in that hole in the clouds down there. That's Columbia University in Morningside Heights. The longer, darker area is Manhattan's Morningside Park, which covers 30 acres. This is the extent of our Manhattan view today. If we were seated on the other side of the airplane and there were no clouds, we would be able to see more of the island of Manhattan, including the skyscrapers of Midtown as well as downtown. Our current controller is handling traffic from multiple airports here, including traffic from Newark, and we can hear him talking to other pilots in the background. As he talks to them, he has to determine how far he can keep us on this heading while working other traffic going to other departure fixes as well. He also needs to keep us within the boundaries of the New York TRACON because the high altitude center is not yet ready to accept us. We have to stay within the TRACON's airspace and not travel to its edge. The other thing to consider is the altitude, which is much easier to control. We just can't climb too high so that we enter the airspace of the center. It's up there where flights are crossing over New York City above 18,000 feet. Those planes are moving fast, but present no conflict to us since we're not allowed to go that high. For now, we're focused on what's going on where we are now, and it's all under the control of one person in the TRACON who's working this frequency. You can hear him talking in the background. I'm certain that his eyes are scanning his airspace all over the radar scope, ensuring safety between all planes. There are so many planes out there. I'm wondering what's going to happen next. Will we get a left turn? A right turn? A U-turn? Will we make a circle? Extensive holding after takeoff is pretty rare. It's more common for arriving traffic when all planes are headed to one specific airport, but White is sort of a destination for us, and it is for JetBlue 1367, who's entering our airspace behind us, climbing out behind us from Westchester County with a destination of Palm Beach. He's about to check in, and the controller will restrict his speed to 250 knots. That's the same speed restriction we were given. Once JetBlue checks in and is given that speed restriction, we're going to be given our next turn.
New York JetBlue 1367, leaving 11 for 12,000. Good afternoon.
JetBlue 1367, New York departure. Good afternoon, maintain 250 knots.
We're 250 on the seat, JetBlue 1367.
Delta 2520, turn left heading 240.
240, Delta 2520.
The 240-degree heading brings us in the general direction toward White, but spoiler alert, it's not our final turn. In the meantime, we're now clear of arrivals to JFK from the west at 13,000 feet, so we're cleared up to 17,000 feet.
Delta 2520, climb maintain 17,000.
17,000, 2520.
17,000 feet is the highest allowed altitude in the TRACON's airspace. We'll be at 17,000 for a while since we're not ready for the handoff to the center. In the gap in the clouds, we're looking at northeastern New Jersey. New York City is off to the left side of the plane. As we climb 4,000 feet higher, we can see that our wings have dipped a bit as the nose is being pointed up to get to 17,000 feet. I've been on this 240-degree heading before, but over the city of New York or north of it if departing from Westchester, never exactly here. I've been in this airspace before, but that's only because my departure from LaGuardia used a different departure fix. I'd expect to be here if my flight were headed to the fix LANA, which is used for flights with destinations more to the southwest like Atlanta. I've got some LANA videos on this channel, and for me right now it feels like I'm headed to Atlanta, not Orlando. Now I mentioned that the TRACON's airspace goes up to 17,000 feet. This is specific to the New York TRACON. This of course is one of the busiest urban airspaces in the world, so the TRACON airspace goes all the way up to 17,000. In other areas, the TRACON's airspace might not go as high, and flights like ours would already be talking to the center. But the high floor altitude of the center is needed to relieve the work of the controllers in the center's airspace above us that focus on flights in the en route phase. For example, there might be a flight from Atlanta to Bangor passing right over New York City. The controller working this flight should have, and it does have, nothing to do with our flight, which is being spaced away from other flights sharing our airspace. It's an intricate network of layering that allows our controller to work this very, very specific area that we're in right now. I'm so focused on what's happening to us now that I forgot that I'm on my million-miler flight. Remember that if you've not watched that video, I invite you to watch it. It's the video I posted before this one, and it places much more focus on what happened at the airport and inside the cabin. It was a great experience on this milestone day, but for me, I became so focused on the delay vectors that we're receiving here that this became the main event of the flight. That's why this separate video focuses specifically on this flight from an air traffic perspective only. Anyway, for now, we just wait for the next command from ATC, and I have no idea what it's going to be. Of course, this heading will change, but the question is when. A left turn would bring us closer, but things are so congested right now that the 240-degree heading is not good enough, so the controller is going to turn us further to the right by 20 more degrees to 260 degrees. That's a heading for flights going to the west. Here comes the next command.
Delta 2520, turn right heading 260.
Turn 260, Delta 2520.
Unit 1219, turn
Okay, this is extreme now. Our turn to the southwest wasn't good enough for spacing, so we're being told to turn to the west. The controller needs to space JetBlue behind us, so he's going to get another turn.
JetBlue 1367, turn right heading 250, vector and trail.
Right 250, JetBlue 1367.
I've never seen the workload for the Dracon controllers this high. This is intense and requires focus and proper timings of heading and speed commands to separate planes going to their initial departure fixes. The only thing that has been routine on this climb has been the altitudes we were assigned. This means that there was no traffic too close to us that would cause any conflicts. We're getting the normal altitudes we would get on a typical flight from LaGuardia to Orlando. The only differences are the headings and the speed restriction. By now we could have easily exceeded 250 knots, and we should have, but we're still restricted in the speed that we can go. Let's listen into the next transmissions. There will be two to the other JetBlue flights. The first one is the JetBlue plane behind us getting a delay vector, and the second is the JetBlue plane ahead of us also getting a delay vector. We'll also hear a speed restriction being given to the now defunct Spirit Airlines from Newark, also headed to White, as it's going to Fort Lauderdale.
JetBlue 1367, turn right heading 260.
Right 260, JetBlue 1367.
JetBlue 1371, turn right heading 120.
120 on the heading, JetBlue 1371. New York Spirit Wings 2562, 5.1, climbing 6,000.
Spirit Wings 2562, New York departure, climb, maintain 1000, maintain 250 knots.
1000, 250 knots, Spirit Wings 2562.
Now back to us. The controller has provided us a 260-degree heading after giving us a 240-degree heading. This was designed to widen the gap toward right, and the controller is now realizing that we can start to turn back to the left again, but it's only a 20-degree turn, back to where we were, 240 degrees.
Delta 24, correction 2520, turn left heading 240.
Up there, 240, 25.
So it's back to where we were. At this point, I'm really starting to wonder why we took off so close to the JetBlue flight ahead of us. We are really burning up a lot of fuel up here, and we could have preserved it if we held on the ground for a bit longer. We took off quicker than what we were told the delay would be. The controller is going to talk to the same pilots we just heard. Here, the JetBlue plane behind us, as well as the Spirit flight from Newark, are going to get further delay vectors, but the JetBlue plane ahead of us is finally going to get cleared to White.
JetBlue 1367, turn left heading 240.
Left 240, JetBlue 1367.
Spirit Wings 2562, turn right heading 270, vector and trail.
Heading 270, Spirit Wings 2562.
JetBlue 1371, proceed direct to White, increase speed to 280 knots.
280 knots, direct White, JetBlue 1371.
It's just transmission after transmission to multiple aircraft, just so passengers can get on down to sunny Florida. That's what they all have in common. Oh, and guess what? There's another airplane on this controller's frequency that's also headed to White. This time it's Delta from LaGuardia, headed to Fort Lauderdale. And of course, just like everyone else headed to the south to White, this aircraft is going to get a speed restriction.
Delta 2321, New York departure, maintain 250 knots.
250 knots, Delta 2321.
That flight is behind us, and little does that pilot know that he'll be doing something like we're doing very shortly. I wonder how much time he spent taxiing out of LaGuardia today. These vectors for spacing to White today are insane. We're now over Hillsborough, New Jersey in Somerset County, 25 miles north of Trenton. We're finally going to get a turn to head in the opposite direction. The controller will now have us turn to the left to the east.
2520, turn left heading 090.
Up turn, 090, 2520.
This is a big turn, and once we level off, our nose will be pointed toward the tip of Sandy Hook, New Jersey. If there were no delays, we would have flown southbound near the Hudson River, and we would have wound up at a point between Sandy Hook and Staten Island over lower New York Bay, but we're only getting the turn to this point right now. This turn is so big that it's going to take about 2 minutes just to get to our 90-degree heading. We've burned so much excess fuel in our climb today. I'm wondering how much reserve fuel we have now on board in case we need to hold into Orlando, go around, or divert. I'm still wondering why we just didn't wait it out on the ground somewhere. Now, this being my million-miler flight, I had a rough idea of where I would be on this flight when I hit the million-miler mark. It would have been around 300 miles into the flight, and I could have celebrated the exact or close to exact moment based on a standard climb and route. But with all these additional twists and turns and additional miles, it's too complicated for me to pinpoint the million-miler mark, but I do know that it is going to be a lot closer to New York City than I expected it to be. This million-miler flight seems like it is a million miles today. Now, that Delta flight behind us is going to get a delay vector for spacing. He's going to be going around in multiple directions, just like we did, because between us and him is that JetBlue flight going the same way. I've never seen so many planes so close to each other going the same direction. Here the controller gives him a left turn.
Delta 2321, turn left heading 180.
Left turn 180, 2321.
But it's not just us, then JetBlue, then Delta. There's that Spirit flight from Newark that needs to get fit into this mix. The controller's placing that plane somewhere behind us because it's going to White. Now, Newark departures going to White actually have two fixes before White, but they still have to fly over White, and we all know what the big mess is today at White. Here's a turn for Spirit, as well as an altitude clearance.
Spirit wings 2562, climb maintain 14,000, turn left heading 240.
14,000 heading 240, Spirit wings 2562.
And way up ahead, a United flight also going to White gets a handoff to the center and a speed increase.
United 1219, increase speed to 280 knots, contact New York Center on 118.907.
118.97, 280 knots, United 1219.
Now the controller is going to ask us just to make sure that we're still at 250 knots.
Delta 2520, verified 250 knots.
Still go 250, Delta 2520.
All right, roger, thank you.
We're looking at Monmouth County down in New Jersey. Finally, we can see a bit more, and the controller is going to turn us slightly to the right now as we get closer to White.
Delta 2520, turn right heading 120.
Turn 120, 2520.
We're south of Staten Island here, and the Atlantic Ocean is in front of us. We won't be going all the way out into lower New York Bay. I've been in this position before via delay vectors where we head west over Monmouth County, but I never experienced what happened before this. This airspace is often used as the final airspace to increase separation to White by having aircraft head to the east. We won't go as far out as the ocean, and I think that we should be turning towards White pretty soon. Now, I'm missing the next two transmissions from the Takeoff controllers for this flight. But in the meantime, I'll let you listen in to the controller talk to some of those other pilots out there that are experiencing delays.
JetBlue 1367, turn left heading 090.
Left 090, JetBlue 1367.
Spirit wings 2562, climb maintain 16,000.
16,000, Spirit wings 2562.
And executive 604, amend altitude, maintain 15,000.
Stop at 15,000, executive 604.
We're turning right now, and I believe this is a turn to around 160 degrees. It should be the final assigned turn for the controller. Once we level off on the approximate 160 degree heading, we'll see a dip of the wing once again, and we'll remain on that heading for some time. That should be the clearance to proceed directly to White in Pine Lake Park in New Jersey. We should be at White soon, and once we get to White, we can follow the flight plan all the way down to the Orlando International Airport, our destination. We took off 20 minutes ago and are still talking to the same air traffic control facility, the New York Takeoff, since we took off. During these 20 minutes, we spoke to two very busy controllers. The first was the LaGuardia departure controller, and the second one, the one that we're talking to now, handles the airspace at the southern end of the Takeoff at higher altitudes, up to 17,000 feet, which is the altitude that we're at now. Now again, I missed the transmission, but I believe at this point the controller is finally clearing us to White. Where we are now is finally where we're supposed to be, and if the demand to White was low, we could have reached this point in less than 10 minutes, but the time was doubled. This, of course, will lead to a later arrival time, and unfortunately, we've wasted so much fuel that could have been saved if we just waited on the ground. Despite missing the last two transmissions, I was able to hear the final transmission in the Takeoff. This is the handoff to the New York Air Route Traffic Control Center in Ronkonkoma, New York. Here, the controller provides an increase to our speed and hands us off to the next ATC facility.
Delta 2520, increase speed to 280 knots, contact New York Center, 118.907.
1897, Delta 2520.
Wow, This is the path that we took after takeoff. It's taken from the map on the screen mounted on the wall in front of my seat. It's crazy. Now I'm going to add each heading that we flew. Can you believe this? We made 10 turns after takeoff before proceeding to White. We started in Queens, climbed over the Bronx, entered Westchester, then flew in New Jersey, then turned around back to fly over Manhattan and a small part of the Bronx again before turning around to head very deep into New Jersey before turning back to the east before heading south. The question is why, and the answer is, I don't know. I mean, I know why the controllers gave us all these turns for separation, but why were we allowed to take off from LaGuardia and spend 20 minutes wasting fuel? That, I don't know. I just was not expecting this based upon the in-trail separation times that the LaGuardia ground controller told us about before we took off.
What a departure that was. We were in the Tracon's airspace for what seemed like maybe 20 minutes.
It indeed was 20 minutes, but we have to move on. The rest of the flight was completely normal. Here, we're just about over White, and we can see McGuire Air Force Base down there. It was around Vineland, New Jersey, which we're looking at down there, when dinner service started. Today, I'm enjoying Million Miler Manicotti, and I ate it while enjoying this view of Chesapeake Bay.
Right now, we're flying over North Carolina, and our cruising altitude today is only 24,000 feet.
The low altitude provided a close-in view of Rocky Mount, North Carolina. After that, I enjoyed some turbulence, but because of the bumps, the pilot brought the plane up much higher, bringing us above the clouds. So I'm going to move forward to the final stages of this flight as we approach the Orlando International Airport. We're descending from the northeast and will land on runway 35 right today, so we'll need to make a right turn onto the final approach course. Lucky me, as I'm seated on the right side of the plane for the right turn. And the right side allowed me to catch this Allegiant Air flight on approach to the Orlando Sanford International Airport. It's about 30 miles between Orlando's Sanford Airport and our destination, the Orlando International Airport, but there's one more airport to see between the two. With the city behind it, here's Orlando's Executive Airport, which is used for general aviation flights. But it's here where we need to go. MCO, formerly known as McCoy Field. This is the Orlando International Airport, and we can see a plane landing on the runway we're bound for, which is the runway closest to us. We're on the downwind leg now, and all we need to do is keep this heading for a few more miles under the guidance of the Orlando Tracom, and when the time is right, we'll make a right turn to form a complete U-turn and land. In a few moments, we'll be on final approach, just like this plane, which is 2 planes ahead of us. Let's land at MCO.
All right, everybody, it's all over. Thank you so much for joining me on the flight today from LaGuardia to Orlando. Remember that if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I invite you to click on the subscribe button below, hit the bell button, hit the like button, and I'll be back with another flight just like this really soon. Thanks, everybody. See ya.